Alright guys, TacticalRab here today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The final weekend of online qualifiers of the season begins later on today, and Clayster has given his frustrations on the way the CDL has handled majors so far this season, especially comparing Major 4 to what other esports are able to do. Does the CDL need to step up its game next season? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. First of all, wanted to mention on the Challenger side, 2 winners of the Elite respectively. Prolute wins it again here, the Elite Stage 4 champs with Spart, Mohawk and Neptune. It's pretty cool stuff for Mohawk because he took a bit of a break, come back into Challengers and is winning once again. And well, also the results in the European side, so Harry and Co, Furious, Mythic, Denza, they took it down pretty impressively in the European side. There has been some debate though over the last couple of days and even months, right? What would happen if the CDL was a 16-team league? It's not going to happen. There isn't the interest from the teams. It's not going to be expanding, but I know that there's been a lot of, push for it to do so over the last several years. What would those additional 4 teams actually be like? Because I look at the top of Challengers, and there's obviously a lot of talent in Challengers. It's, they're high-level players, a lot of these top guys. They can come into the CDL and make some noise. We've seen what Scrappy's done this past season. We've seen what's, even the likes of Kremp and Co, they've brought into Boston. Talented players, not forgetting Ghosty, of course, what he's done for OpTic. But there's some of these guys, right, the likes of Prolute, Spark, Neptune, they've had their shots in the CDL for a time. Maybe they even did some decent things. Then they obviously sparked one event with Los Angeles Guerrillas last year at stage 2, then back down to Challengers. And likes of Neptune, he's been frying in Challengers, but yet when he's in the CDL, it doesn't seem quite the same. So I do wonder, right, like if they were to add 4 more teams, what would it be like? I know there's been some debate that there might have to be, this is why, salary caps exist in some other sports, because otherwise the league would be very top heavy, I think, and it would be top heavy, right? It already is top heavy. You look down at the Londons and, okay, Florida are looking a bit better, but Los Angeles Guerrillas and these organizations that are getting fried week in, week out, you had another 4 teams, like, would it actually improve the league? I'm not so convinced. And obviously adding those 4 teams is not just because there isn't enough talent in Challengers, because there certainly is, but it's because there isn't the interest from the organizations right now. It's a kind of a demand thing from the organizational perspective rather than a supply of good quality talent. These are the organizations that people would like to see. Mack put together a poll on Breaking Point a little bit ago now. I think he's going to do these quite often, so I'll make sure I mention it next time this goes around. But people voted for which organizations they would like to see come into CoD. Number 1 for quite some time was Cloud9, of course, an organization that was in Call of Duty for some time. Obviously didn't happen when the franchise era came around. Complexity returning would be nice. Even Sentinels have been a big organization right in a couple of different esports. TSM, Liquid, I mean, a lot of these organizations were in CoD. It's Cloud9, Complexity, TSM, Liquid, Fnatic, Rise, G2, like all of these organizations with the exception of even NRG were in CoD, right, because they partnered technically with Chicago Huntsmen. Apart from Na'Vi and Sentinels, all of these orgs have been in CoD at one point or another. Even Fnatic had a team back in Infinite Warfare, if you guys don't remember that one, with Tommy and Wuskin and Co. I think Sunny B, right, or was it all that roster back in the day? The World Championship for this year then is not far away at all, but back in 2020 it was in August when the World Championship was, 2 months later than we're seeing this year, which is unfortunate to be honest, but these were the numbers at the time. Crimsix got MVP from the championship weekend. Shotzzy was MVP of the season, despite the fact that, okay, Clay had the best KD of the team. Now, look, it's kind of funny in a way that a lot of people say, oh, that KD doesn't matter, etc., etc., it's what you do on the map, but then when Crimsix has the bad KD and Clay has the good KD, everyone's like, oh yeah, Clay definitely deserved that MVP or whatever. So I always find it, people just change their mind on whether KD matters or not, depending on whether they actually like the player. And as Clay says, though, got told it's not the whole champs MVP, it's grand finals MVP, because in fairness, Clay and Shotzzy were probably the best players, maybe even Huke to a part, but in terms of impact, right, over the course of that entire weekend, Clay and Shotzzy played very well. Crimsix, though, in the finals itself, the grand finals against FaZe, was super impactful and probably was their best player. Great in search and destroy, despite taking a negative KD over the weekend, so maybe there's a part of Clay that thinks, damn, wish I had that grand finals MVP, or at least I had the World Championship winning MVP that time, and Crimsix didn't win it. But in the history books, Crimsix go down as the MVP winner. Speaking of Clayster, though, this was the big tweet that he came up with yesterday. CoD Major versus CS Major. Now, of course, look, Counter-Strike is, from an esports perspective, on a totally different level to Call of Duty. Does it have to be necessarily? Call of Duty, obviously we're biased here, right? Watching the scene, I think it's got the best personalities, the best storylines, and is an entertaining game to watch and to play at a high level. Is it Counter-Strike? No. Does it have the global, worldwide appeal of Counter-Strike? No. Is it the same on a competitive level of Counter-Strike? Absolutely not. But to say that the Call of Duty majors and the major events can't at least, come close to what Counter-Strike is able to do, I don't think it's necessarily the case. Now, yes, this is the CSGO major. There's only a couple of them every single year. It's a bigger event than a Call of Duty major, which happens, 5 or 6 times a season with any luck. And therefore, you could say this is an unfair comparison. And in part, it is, of course. But at the same time, the Counter-Strike community or the Counter-Strike scene is an open circuit tournament system. Call of Duty is, as people have said, a $300 million league. So if anything, this is an unfair comparison in favor of Call of Duty. Yeah, teams have paid serious money to get into this league, and this is what we got delivered upon right back at Major 4. Well, okay, this is not what we got delivered on. This is what we got delivered where Maven had to do these intros. I mean, Octane called this the most cringe moment he's ever done in his entire life. And this is no disrespect to Belong Arenas, right? But back at Major 4, when we could have had a venue in front of a crowd and all this stuff in New York, it didn't happen, and the solution was to go to this venue with no fans and everything like that. So I think Clay is rightfully looking back on this in frustration and saying, damn, in Counter-Strike, a game that Clay and a lot of the other pros will watch, especially for the majors. I'm always tuning in for the CS majors. It's so much fun to watch it over the few weeks. Also for Counter-Strike, where they've got the pick'em system, you can go in the game and spend a few quid, get your silver coin, upgrade it to gold and to diamond if you get your pick'ems right over the weeks, get the souvenir cases. That money, the sticker money, trickles down to the teams and to the players. And just the fact that the open circuit is what it is spectacular in many ways for Counter-Strike. I mean, if you guys have been following it at all, Into the Breach, a UK CS team, in large part, at least 3 of the players are UK. They came from the open qualifiers, went through the RMRs, qualified for the legend stage, went 3 and 2 of the legend stage, qualified to be on this stage. So the guys that were on this stage had never even been to a major before. They didn't have to pay to get in. They just qualified because they were, well, one of the best 8 teams in the world right now, whereas obviously the CDL is a bit different. So there's many things about the Counter-Strike ecosystem that are definitely good to look at and to potentially replicate, especially comparing what their majors look like compared to what our majors look like. And I'll just share about a minute or so here from when they introduced Heroic, probably the tournament favorites right now, to the crowd. And I mean, like, this goes seriously hard. So I'm not going to deny that CSGO is on a completely different level from a competitive perspective and from an esports perspective to Call of Duty, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If you look back at what Call of Duty was doing a few years ago, some of the world championships we had, even 2017, 2019, for example, the stages we had, the crowds that we were pulling at the time, we can still pull those crowds today, but it just seems like the execution isn't quite there as it used to be anymore. I mean, just obviously we saw those images a while ago, and as Clay says, look, before anyone thinks I'm oblivious to how absurd the comparison is, trust me, I know, but I can't believe we played at a local LAN center for a major, which is understandable. Like the crowds we had, Boston, OpTic's Texas event, of course, and I'm sure we're going to have at Toronto, fantastic stuff. But the fact that one of the majors was in Columbus at a LAN center is, I gotta understand Clayster's frustration given, he's in his probably last few years of his career. Maybe he's going to go for another decade, who knows, but I'm sure Clay wants to revel in the time that he can in front of a crowd. And as a competitor, I'm sure you look at some footage like this of the crowds they how this was the French crowd for the home favourite team, really, Vitality, with 2 French players, Zoa and Apex, walking out in front of it. And I mean, French crowds in esports have always come different. Even ESWC for Call of Duty back in the day was absolutely fantastic. But as others have pointed out here in the replies, like, this was the venue and the setup for the Call of Duty World Championship 2017, right? And is this particularly dissimilar? Now, maybe today we're going to have, obviously Vegas is going to be a different story to what we had in Columbus for that major event. And as Clay says, you know, of course they won in 2019 here. And again, it doesn't look, you look at some of these images pre-CDL, doesn't look too dissimilar if you imagine a trajectory that Call of Duty could have got on if the CDL didn't even exist, what we could be looking like today. So it's just interesting to see that this is the open tournament circuit in Counter-Strike. In Call of Duty, it's the $300 million league. And Blast is putting on this event for CSGO. It's not like run by Valve or the developers or anything like that, or anything that they've created. It's a third party that, you know, got permission to do it because that's the way the tournament circuit works. And you have to wonder why a franchise league looks like this, a non-franchise league looks like this, and maybe the CDL needs to try and step up their game just a little bit. Now, as Clay does say, need to see the champs venue so I can make an accurate tweet. This is the champs venue, the Thomas and Mack Center in Vegas, so they'll probably set this up to look rather nice, as we've seen in the previous images, so we can then compare, right, what our champs looks like compared to what the CS Major looks like, and then there's a debate. But I mean, the walkouts and stuff probably aren't going to happen. I will also mention, though, this from Clay, because he tweets out the Oblivious tweet, and Ben says, you know, classic Jimmy baiting for impressions on Twitter. Clayster says, though, the real bait is everyone believing no room for challenges is the reason New York didn't host Major 4, because obviously the frustration from Clayster's side is they weren't in Major 4 in New York, they were in Columbus at this local LAN center. So we've heard 2 reasons why the event in New York was cancelled. One of them was because the CDL wanted to force every team to have a Challengers event alongside it, and therefore, because they couldn't do that with the venue size, they had to cancel it, which is, you know, I didn't really buy that particularly, to be honest, but Clayster says that that was maybe the most common belief. The other rumor was that I think it was Mountain Dew as a partner, like, pulled out, and therefore they just straight up didn't have the money to run it, and couldn't follow through. So that is probably the more likely outcome here, let's be honest, right? Another thing from Clay as well, we know that Clayster, when he falls off the map, especially back in the jetpack days, that's a classic meme, but it does still exist across esports here. There wasn't so many when Crucial fell off the map, I think, on Vertigo yesterday, but yeah, so yeah, there was a couple of Clay spams in the chat, which is pretty nice to see still, that living on to a certain extent. Let's talk then about the matches for this weekend. These are the current CDL standings. OpTic 4-0, they play one more game this weekend against Florida, that's coming up tomorrow, but the rest of the games are really interesting because Surge, Minnesota, and Thieves are all in a predicament where they could start in losers. So could Legion, so probably could Florida Mutineers, but they're looking okay to qualify for winners, Florida, and if they're in winners, then one pretty decent team has to be in losers. Obviously, Florida have been decent so far this stage. These are the matches over the entirety of the weekend then, so it's not exactly a blockbuster weekend, but there's certainly some really interesting games. I mean, Vegas Surge on Saturday is massive. Both of Minnesota's games are massive. Obviously, Thieves need to win both their series as well. Seattle play 2 series to try and ensure they qualify for winners, because that's certainly up in the air for them. And these are specifically then the games that we'll circle in on today. So Florida versus London. Right now, Florida should quite clearly be favourites in this. Usually, a couple of months ago, I'd have said this is a coin toss, right? But right now, Florida, you know, should win this series. I would say they're 75-80% favourites to do so with the way they played last weekend. So yeah, Mutineers, I'll take them in at 3-1. Give London a map, but maybe I shouldn't. Then Thieves Rokkr, massive series, right? Thieves absolutely need to win this to ensure that they're not going to start in losers. If Thieves lose this and go 0-4, they will be in losers bracket at the major. Minnesota also need to really try and win, because if they lose this series and then they lose to Toronto, they'll be in losers as well, and Vegas might well be in winners. So that's a really big series. I'll take Thieves to win it probably 3-1, but obviously it's, you know, attaches back in the team, maybe a bit of a honeymoon period. It's going to be really interesting this, but Thieves surely will finally come good again. And then Surge Subliners to finish off the day. Doesn't seem spectacular on paper, but nonetheless, Surge are currently, as we just saw, 1-2, 3-7 map count. If they get blown out here, doesn't matter what they do against Vegas, they'll be in losers. And I mean, they can't really afford that, given the fact that they've come, what, top 6, top 8, and now they might be in losers again. So this is kind of like, Surge really need to win this series, but I think Subliners 3-2 might get the job done. So I don't know, really interesting final couple of series today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.